This may be the first time we've had two in a single day.
Person in our nation has benefited from that work. You know, everywhere I go, I tell people, you may not be a union member, but you better thank unions for that 5-day work week. You better thank a union member for sick leave. You better thank a union member for paid leave. You better thank a union member for vacation time.
What happened to authenticity, Douglas?
So Kamala is doing something that's tried and tested. But you're right, Rita. It does not look authentic. It looks horribly pandering, a diversity hire. Because Joe Biden said he wanted a black woman as his running mate. That means that instead of being able to choose from all of the talent in America, he could only choose from the talent within 7% of the population in America. Of course, Joe Biden has given fewer press conferences during his time in office than any president of recent decades. And it looked like Kamala Harris was trying to beat him to that record, if no other.
Kamala Harris received more knockdowns from Douglas Murray than the sand received from the sea. There is nobody that roasted this woman with more ferocity and frequency than he did, and he never fails to deliver. Today, we prepared a juicy compilation of Kamala getting brutally slammed by Douglas, and the roasts get progressively more savage as time goes on. Let's get into it.
You wrote last week in the New York Post about Kamala and co deserving an Oscar, and she's really taken your advice on board. We've had different accents from Kamala before, but this may be the first time we've had two in a single day.
Person in our nation has benefited from that work. You know, everywhere I go, I tell people, you may not be a union member, but you better thank unions for that 5-day work week. You better thank a union member for sick leave. You better thank a union member for paid leave. You better thank a union member for vacation time.
What happened to authenticity, Douglas? Kamala in Pittsburgh sounds very different to Kamala in Detroit.
It's time for the savagery to begin.
Yes, Kamala is following in some very noble footsteps here, of course. Hillary Clinton was a great purveyor of different accents depending on the part of America she was in. Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, of course, congresswoman, Democrat congresswoman, is also a fine one for if she's speaking to, for instance, a majority black church, she will go into a special register and put on an entirely new voice. So Kamala is doing something that's tried and tested. But you're right, Rita, it does not look authentic. It looks horribly pandering. It's just another example of the fact that America is trying to work out who this politician is, and they're not really getting an answer.
She knows she can't win on merit, so she has to swindle her branding around the same way Starmer swindles his opinions on trans people. You can tell these people are being pushed around behind the curtains. Moving on to the next fiery roast.
And we've now got the White House declaring that Kamala Harris is the future of the Democratic Party.
I mean, one of the reasons why he picked the vice president, President Kamala Harris, is because she is indeed the future of the party. And he's very proud to have partnered with her and continue to partner with her in delivering an unprecedented record for the American people.
Douglas, she even referred to the Veep as President Kamala Harris there. Do you see that as likely? Could there be a move to replace Biden with Kamala now, or go to the election with her as the candidate?
I mean, here's the thing. Biden himself and Dr. Jill Biden, his wife, are clearly digging in. There seems to be little doubt about that.
This was before Kamala even announced her presidency.
The campaign email that's just been sent out to everyone is along the lines of, you know, I was brought up never to quit, and I'm not a quitter, and Americans aren't quitters, so I'm not going to quit. You know, and when you're on the ground, you pull yourself up, you dust yourself off, and you get out into the ring again. I mean, this is fanciful stuff. Let me put it this way. Really believe, does anyone really believe that 3 years from now, Joe Biden is going to be in the Oval Office, is going to be able to be there, is going to be functioning as the US president? I really don't think anyone does. So at the moment, you're right. I mean, the White House press secretary and others have sort of started to mention Kamala Harris, But they do so, of course, knowing that her approval ratings are even worse than Joe Biden's, much worse than Joe Biden's. Her likability is through down the toilet. And, this is a very interesting, it's not just about these personalities.
Douglas wasn't bluffing. Take a look at these graphs showing her rating before announcing her presidency. Her approval rate was lower than Biden's. And let's not forget about the funny drop she had the moment she stepped into the White House in 2021. Now just listen to the blow Douglas sends her direction next.
It's also about the way in which politics is done now in America. It's not rude. It is simply the fact that Kamala was a diversity hire. Because Joe Biden said he wanted a Black woman as his running mate. That means that instead of being able to choose from all of the talent in America, he could only choose from the talent within 7% of the population in America. And, as I always say, if you live by DEI, you'll die by DEI. Because now they have this hugely unpopular figure, the vice president, who has no meaningful achievements to her name in her years in office. Everything she's been tasked with, like the border, has not got better under her management, far from it. And here you have this person who they now cannot pass over because of their own rules that they have invented and decided to play by.
A total of 0 punches were held in the clip you just witnessed. So brutal.
So I mean, it's not my concern, as it were, to advise the Democrat Party, but I would just say, it's clear that Joe's not going to make it. It's clear that Kamala would lose to anyone. What are they going to do? If they're going to do a switch out, they're going to have to do it soon, because there's going to be somebody, whether it was Kamala, Gavin Newsom, whoever, they are going to have to introduce this person to the public very, very fast. And they don't have a day to lose, in my view.
It's unfortunate that they can't change their mind now. This especially since these days, Kamala is also hinting at a potential Twitter slam down. Just take a look at this.
He has lost his privileges, and it should be taken down. And the bottom line is that you can't say that you have one rule for Facebook and you have a different rule for Twitter. The same rule has to apply, which is that there has to be a responsibility that is placed on these social media sites to understand their power. They are directly speaking to millions and millions of people without any level of oversight or regulation, and that has to stop.
Yes, I am sure that free speech is safe at the hands of this woman, and I am 100% sure she is going to hire the best, most discerning cyber policemen there are, that are going to perfectly understand what hate speech looks like. But anyway, let's move on to the next Douglas indiscriminately smacking Kamala clip.
We finally have a Kamala Harris interview. Today, CNN announced that she will be sitting down with Dana Bush, but the interview is not live, and she will have Tim Walz joining her. Can we trust CNN to ask the tough questions and also not edit out the word salads we've come to expect from Harris?
We'll see. I think it's a fascinating thing that the Democrat nominee for president is actually going to deign to answer any questions from the press. Of course, Joe Biden has given fewer press conferences during his time in office than any president of recent decades. And it looked like Kamala Harris was trying to beat him to that record, if no other.
That was so good. Douglas never hesitates to hit right under the belt.
The fact that she's doing with her running mate, Tim Walz, is extraordinarily interesting. And I'll tell you why. It's for this reason. We don't know any details of what Kamala Harris would like to do or intends to do if she gets the most important job in the world in November. We don't know what her fiscal policies are going to be, what her trade policies are going to be. We don't have any detail of what her border and immigration policies are going to be. And we don't have any knowledge at all of what her foreign policy is going to be. And the problem of Tim Walz or indeed Kamala Harris appearing with one without the other is that the other may say things which their running mate doesn't know or hasn't heard about, and that'll be because they're making it up on the fly.
And whenever she is actually asked about her policies in public, she always resorts to the infamous word salads and feeble attempts at trying to explain something she wasn't even asked about.
So if you were to have a sit down just with Tim Walz and say, now, look, do you agree with everything in Kamala Harris's foreign policy? He might have to reveal the fact that there is no foreign policy and might have to just make some stuff up. Then, of course, the press would say to her, if they ever get a chance to sit down with her again, and as I say, it seems to some extent unlikely that she does ever want to sit down with the media, they would say to her, well, Tim Walz said this about your foreign policy, and then she'd have to try to make something up on the fly as well. So it's very clever of them to decide to sit down together, because that way they can contradict each other, but less.
Well, there is also this transformation of Harris from a staunch leftist who had the most liberal voting record in the Senate to this tough law and order, pro-America figure. She's now claiming she doesn't support a fracking ban, despite in the past saying she'd bring one in on day one.
As if politicians would ever flip their opinions in an attempt to hide what their real plans are. Wink.
She's backing away from electric vehicle mandates, and she's suddenly in favour of a border wall. Douglas should be wearing a MAGA hat soon.
It's very interesting. Of course, she wouldn't be the first politician to promise absolutely everything and say contradictory things in the run-up to trying to get everyone's vote in November. But the interesting thing about Kamala Harris is less the contradictions than what basic instinct she seems to have had about politics as she's expressed them in the past. This claim that she's now in favor of a border wall doesn't seem to me to be flip-flopping. It does seem to me to be absolutely typical election season pandering.
Here's how the immigration stats look like under the watch of Vice President Kamala. Over 11 million undocumented immigrants crossed the border since 2021, and it's yet to stop. In all her public speeches regarding this issue, she always made it clear that she sees mass immigration as a thing that we need to accept and that she's eager to continue encouraging it. This is your president.
But what's more interesting is what she said about the border wall any time before when she's been questioned about it. I just watched back earlier today one of her appearances on The View. How can I describe The View to non-Americans? It's like Britain's Loose Women, but less cerebral. It's like I mean, it's a very unfunny, funny, light daytime show. And so, of course, she presented herself to these fans of hers on the panel to ask her softball questions some years ago. And on that occasion, Kamala Harris said, in one of those jokes that no one else finds a joke, but she finds absolutely hysterical, that she says that she's very interested in and has dealt with international criminal bodies.
Prepare yourself for what's about to come next.
And in going after those people, she found that the interesting thing about international groups is that they operate internationally. She found that absolutely hysterically funny and laughed like mad for ages. But the point is that she said in that interview, in that softball thing, she said the border wall wouldn't stop these international gangs, and then laughed manically. Well, the thing is that everything she tried to say in that interview was borders and walls don't matter, that they don't do anything. Well, if that is her view, and it seems to have been her view until yesterday, that seems to me to be a fairly settled view. She thinks that it doesn't really matter if you have a border or a border wall because of international things. So I don't really buy this late conversion to a wall at all.
It is fine. If her border policies suck, then it's good to know that her social media policing strategies are amazing. Take a look at this.
And will put the Department of Justice of the United States back in the business of justice. We will double the Civil Rights Division and direct law enforcement to counter this extremism. We will hold social media platforms accountable for the hate infiltrating their platforms, because they have a responsibility to help fight against this threat to our democracy. And if you profit off of hate, If you act as a megaphone for misinformation or cyber warfare, if you don't police your platforms, we are going to hold you accountable as a community.
It's okay, guys. She's only concerned about misinformation. She will definitely not have some of her brave law enforcers make use of this policing to silence people that say something they don't like. Definitely. Unheard of. Never happened before. Now, alas, let's take a look at Douglas's longest and most brutal onslaught he ever had on Kamala. Prepare yourself for what's about to come next, because this is going to get good.
Now let's talk about a woman who is undergoing a rather dramatic rebrand. Kamala Harris is being presented by the Democrats and the US media as a vibrant and visionary, completely competent presidential candidate. Just look at the cover of, this is New York Magazine. It's incredible. It is real. A lot of people think this is some sort of a parody. There's Kamala sitting on top of a giant coconut, surrounded by celebrating Democrat heavyweights, Pelosi, Obama. You can see Beyonce and George Clooney, I think, there as well. Douglas, are you excited for the Camelot era?
It's amazing what can happen in a few weeks, isn't it, Rita? I mean, when you and I last spoke, Joe Biden was still staggering on, pretending he had another 4.5 more years in him.
And now here we are.
And everyone in the legacy media, with a few noble exceptions, was saying, absolutely, this guy is the future. He may be 81, but he's the future. And we won't hear any talk to the contrary. Now, of course, Joe Biden is already the past and has been clearly unceremoniously ditched at the behests of leaders of his own party. And now the whole story has to change. So again, when you and I last spoke, Rita, Kamala Harris was one of the most foot-in-mouth politicians of our era, a person of very few discernible talents and who had absolutely all the qualities of leadership apart from followers. And now, what a difference a few weeks makes. Because now, of course, there's New York Magazine and all those same legacy media, again, with a few noble exceptions, are seriously trying to push Kamala on the not just American public, but the world public as the savior of the republic.
Not only does he blast her with a one-of-a-kind ferocity, but he also does in the most hilarious way possible. This is Douglas Murray in a nutshell, ladies and gentlemen. And of course, if people are so keen on framing Donald Trump as being Satan, then she's obviously going to be presented as being the next big savior of this world, though I don't see her halo.
And it's quite a sight to behold. You know, these are long weeks in politics these days. There's several months until the election. Goodness knows what will happen in the meantime. But I reckon that this varnish and gloss and razzmatazz that the Democrat loyal media are trying to push is not really going to stick. I think it's going to wear off pretty fast.
I think so. And at the same time, they've tried to bury what happened with Trump and the attempted assassination. Yes. It's almost like that has already been memory hold, and you would expect so much more coverage and scrutiny about what happened that day.
Agreed. But behold, because what is about to happen next is downright brutal.
The many failures of the Secret Service and local authorities to allow that to happen the way it did. But Douglas, there seems to be very little interest in pursuing that story from the bulk of the media.
Well, it's not just the story of that, Rita, but I think it's the story also of what led up to it. I mean, the only person responsible for this, so far as we know at the moment, is the gunman. And his motives are still being looked into by the intelligence services and so on. But the thing that strikes me is, you know, in the run-up to that attempted assassination of former President Trump, leading Democrats, including Kamala Harris and Joe Biden, were all, again, with their amen chorus in the media, saying, you know, this is going to be the last election you can vote in. This is a vote, you know, on democracy. This is an election about democracy and whether we get the chance to ever vote again.
And let me tell you, fun fact. In 2019, Donald Trump's Twitter account reached a peak of 1,000 tags per minute. If I had to guess, I'd say that 80% of those lads were the peeps squandering energy because it is well known that haters spend 3 times more time watching the person they hate. Also, another cool fact is that Trump was sending over 1,500 tweets in a single month. Okay, moving back to Douglas's fiery verbal onslaught sent Kamala's way.
And by the way, women, you're all going to be sold into servitude, and all of these white supremacists like J.D. Vance and his wife are all going to kill you all the time. And they were doing that right up until the day of the attempted assassination. There were a few hours of merciful silence and decency, and now they're back at it again. They are back at it again. And, you know, you and I have talked about this before, Rita. If you think and keep saying and don't think, but just say it anyway, as I say, that Donald Trump is Hitler and it's going to be the Fourth Reich if he gets a second term in power, it's not surprising if somebody is going to decide that the great fantasy of going back in time and killing Hitler is now your opportunity and you can do it.
Throw back to that one random guy that actually wrote a fan fiction of Trump getting shot.
We know because this had happened in 2016 when a young British man tried to seize a gun from a policeman at a Trump rally in order to try to shoot then candidate Trump. Nobody toned down the rhetoric in the years since. If anything, they ramped it up. And if this were any other scenario, Rita, there wouldn't just be a focus on the gunman. There would be a focus on all the people that made these hyperbolic and histrionic claims for years. And people would be saying, why don't we tone it down a bit? Why don't we stop pretending that, you know, Donald Trump and J.D. Vance are white supremacist Hitlerites and just recognize there are other Americans with a different vision of where we're going in America, and they need to be taken on for their arguments. But no, oh no. The ability to do that lasted a few minutes some Saturdays ago, and now they're back at it. And I think it's shameful.
Absolutely wrecked. I told you this was going to be brutal. No leftist that can't tone it down is safe from Douglas's verbal prowess. If Kamala deserves an Oscar, then Douglas deserves the World Heavyweight Champion belt. Because this was quite the knockout.
For one, I don't think it's a discourse that should be in politics, because at the end of the day, the people who made those arguments have been in what should be a much stickier position, because they're saying, this guy is Hitler, but I'm sorry he wasn't killed. Well, good luck holding on to those two ideas at the same time. Good luck.
We've just made it at the end. I'm not sure how Kamala is supposed to recover from that absolute beatdown, but one thing's for sure. Douglas is not going to stop coming after her, not even after she loses. On a different note, here's a funny clip of Kamala nodding along as some random dude is explaining why we need to be racists towards white people.
And will put the Department of Justice of the United States back in the business of justice. We will double the Civil Rights Division and direct law enforcement to counter this extremism. We will hold social media platforms accountable for the hate infiltrating their platforms, because they have a responsibility to help fight against this threat to our democracy. And if you profit off of hate, if you act as a megaphone for misinformation or cyber warfare, if you don't police your platforms, we are going to hold you accountable as a community.
There you go, guys. Don't group black people with anybody else. Write them a different set of laws based on the color of their skin. Forget about the civil rights movement. Anyway, if you want to watch Jordan Peterson shut down some daring Oxford students that tried to challenge him in a highly intellectual debate, then you can click on the pop-up on screen and we'll catch you in the next video. Peace.